U.S. President Donald Trump is considering the possibility of deploying American long-range Tomahawk missiles in Ukraine and will make the best decision regarding this matter. This was confirmed on Fox News by U.S. Vice President J.D. Vance. He also explained the change in Trump's attitude. Last week, he criticized Russia and said that its economy is going to hell, even suggesting that Ukraine is capable of reclaiming all its territories. J.D. Vance says the president's words are based on reality. Russia is not winning the war, despite making incredible efforts, suffering heavy human losses, and exhausting its economy. And instead of accepting this reality, it refuses to engage in negotiations with Ukraine in any format, either directly or through U.S. mediation. So Vice President Vance called on Russia to, quote, wake up and accept reality. A blackout, Russian style. In Belgorod, the local thermal power plant came under fire. Part of the city was left without electricity and water. This was reported by Russian telegram channels. According to local residents, on the evening of September 28th, at least 5 loud explosions were heard in the area of the city's thermal power plant in Belgorod. Due to the shelling, part of the city was left without electricity, power and water supply. In some areas, traffic lights, street lighting and air raid warning systems stopped working. It is also reported that the local electrical substation was hit. Problems with electricity supply are also being observed in nearby settlements. It was also tense overnight in the Bryansk region. There, the Karachev electrodiesel plant was under attack. This plant, among other things, produces components for military missiles, armored vehicles, and communication systems. Some Russian units have found themselves encircled in the Dobropilia direction, according to Commander-in-Chief Alexander Syrsky. As a result of the counteroffensive operation, more than 3,000 occupiers and nearly 1,000 pieces of equipment were eliminated. Overall, during the Ukrainian counteroffensive, 175 square kilometers of territory were liberated and nearly 200 kilometers were cleared of sabotage groups, Syrsky reported. Kupiansk in the Kharkiv region also continues to be protected from saboteurs. The city remains under the control of the armed forces of Ukraine, the General Staff assures. Active counter-sabotage measures are currently underway. In the north of Kupiansk, Ukrainian defenders are searching for and driving out Russian occupiers who infiltrate the residential area in small groups, trying to establish themselves and build up strike forces. Entry into the city for civilians is restricted to ensure the effective conduct of military operations against saboteurs. The Russians are using a similar tactic to try to capture Yampil, which is southeast of Lyman in the Donetsk region. However, our defenders responded quickly to the enemy's plan and repelled 5 attacks in this direction over the past day. The Pokrovsk and Novopavlivka sectors of the front remain the most active. Half of the combat engagements are taking place precisely in these areas. Ukrainian defenders are also performing successfully in the skies. Our soldiers destroyed a Russian Mi-28 helicopter using an FPV drone. The pilots of the 59th Brigade's Unmanned Systems Unit made it happen, according to Unit Commander Robert Madyar Brody.
1+1 continues the United News Marathon. Yevhen Plinsky, Nata Ostrovska, and we already have a guest with us, Dmitry Zhmail. He is the co-founder and executive director of the Ukrainian Center for Security and Cooperation. There are a huge number of topics this morning because J.D. Vance said completely the opposite in an interview. What he used to say about Ukraine, now he is finally saying, for us, it's encouraging when he says that Russia needs to come to its senses and see its losses on the battlefield and analyze that their progress in the war is insignificant, while their losses are much greater. This was unexpected from J.D. Vance. Let's break all of this down.
And not just this news. Welcome to the studio, Mr. Dimitro. Let's start with the most up-to-date news. It looks like the U.S. has decided to allow us to strike Russian territory with long-range missiles. Everyone is quoting Keith Kellogg's statement in which he literally said, if you judge by what Trump, Vice President Vance, and Secretary of State Rubio have said, then the answer is yes. To use the ability to carry out long-range strikes. What does this statement mean? We welcome any such statements because they bring us closer to being able to implement these projects. But does this statement really open up any opportunities for us? Please, could you decode this for us?
Yes, it definitely opens up opportunities for us, but the question is whether we actually have these systems, because let me remind you, we lost our Kursk bridgehead precisely due to a lack of long-range systems. When we ran out of HIMARS, ATACMS, or had a critically low number of them, we were simply overwhelmed by numbers and pushed back to the border. He also clarifies there, as Kellogg says, sometimes they can do it, sometimes they can't. This is because the Americans have resumed intelligence sharing with us. And overall, they can control all of this by supplying certain systems like those same HIMARS and ATACMS. So far, unfortunately, there is still no confirmation regarding the Tomahawks. But let me remind you that when Zelensky talked about this long-range weaponry, Trump said he would think about it. Why is this happening now? First of all, we shouldn't get carried away. Everything can be rolled back very quickly. But at last, this is some real response to the actions Russia is taking. Frankly speaking, and thank God for it, Russia is acting foolishly. It doesn't even show any kind of demonstrative flexibility. Trump understands that no matter what, the front has stalled, and these advances of a few hundred meters, well, that doesn't surprise anyone at all. Everyone realizes that the movement of the Russian army, fortunately, is neither dynamic nor consistent. And very often we actually cut off all these wedges. Therefore, if the Russians continue to behave this way, most likely it will definitely come to practice. Why? Because this has already happened before. Back when we received the Attack-MS and HIMARS, we were quite effective in destroying within the 300-kilometer zone that these systems can reach all the infrastructure, about 20 airfields from which tactical aviation takes off, and in total up to 200 military facilities. This includes the FSB, border guards, the Russian army, and their National Guard, all of whom took part in crimes against our state. So no matter what, there is hope. But as they say, we shouldn't get too enchanted now so we don't end up disappointed again later.
You've already mentioned the Tomahawks. I'd like to focus on this because a Fox News journalist, she's a TV host, asked J.D. Vance about it. He said that the issue regarding the Tomahawks is literally being decided at this very moment, and that he would give the right and it would be better for Trump himself to announce it. But why are we talking about these cruise missiles right now? And ultimately, why are they necessary for the front at this moment?
They are critically needed by us precisely to destroy decision-making centers. For example, during our Kursk operation, we destroyed their headquarters, we eliminated their top generals, and that helped us. So why exactly now? Again, this is Russia's position, which, to put it mildly, makes Washington look like fools. And, you know, about a year ago, I said somewhere that we would definitely get to the Tomahawk, and everyone, to put it mildly, laughed and said it was unrealistic, that the Americans would never agree to it. And now here we are at this point in time, and this is, well, truly a topic of discussion. Why is this happening? Because everyone is fed up with Putin. The Americans are finally, well, raising the level of tension themselves. And we need this, first of all, to continue destroying the oil refining industry or to carry out other targeted strikes. These are decision-making centers. These are headquarters. These are large ammunition depots. Because, let me remind you, last year's strikes on the border targeting the RAU depots, that is rocket and artillery weapons, well, they really slowed down the Russian offensive actions. That's why we critically need these missiles precisely to choke off this Russian winter, autumn, spring offensive.
And these missiles, what kind of platform are they launched from? Because we know that the American military launches them from their ships at sea, much like the Russians do with their Caliber missiles. Will we be able to launch them from land or from aircraft? From which platforms?
By the way, a lot of experts actually bought into this whole story and said that, first of all, these are sea-based missiles and we don't have a navy, or that they're silo-based, which, given the conditions of active combat and the threat of air attacks, would take a very long time to build such a silo. But the Americans also have mobile Tomahawks, where they are mounted on a mobile platform, on a truck, and can carry, roughly speaking, a single tube with one missile. And accordingly, this also gives us a lot of opportunities for maneuvering. This means launching from different locations so that the Russians simply don't have time to react. So in fact, we do have ways to launch them. There's also the option of launching from aircraft, but we don't have planes that could be adapted for this missile. But as for ground-based launches, yes, they exist, and I think it's quite realistic to obtain them.
In answering my question, you said that Putin has gotten on everyone's nerves. To put it simply, how could he have gotten on his nerves when J.D. Vance has always been rather cautious toward the Russians, even in his statements? But now he's saying, and I can quote, how many more people are they willing to kill for the sake of a very minor, if any, military advantage on the ground? I hope the answer is not that many, but certainly our position is that we will continue to work for peace and hope that the Russians will finally wake up and see the reality on the ground. The winter campaign is ahead. We are approaching it. Autumn. October is already approaching, and going forward we will be talking about a stalemate and only minor movements. Or could they still be preparing something unpredictable at the front on the map we're looking at now?
They are not preparing anything unpredictable. They have carried out the largest regrouping since the start of the full-scale invasion. Fortunately, so far the successes of this advance have been insignificant. Specifically in the area of Kostiantynivka, 4 kilometers, 2 kilometers, and consolidation in Krasny Lyman. Most likely the battle for Myrnograd will begin in the near future. But for the world, to put it mildly, this is simply nothing. During the election campaign, Vance openly said, "I don't care about Ukraine." Why now? Because perhaps once again, Trump's team understands that in order to force the Russians into real negotiations, a series of these painful blows must be dealt. Vance, well, he basically echoed what Kellogg said. If the president says go right, we go right. If he says left, we go left. Fortunately, if we look at Trump's inner circle right now, roughly speaking, the party of war is Kellogg. And there is, accordingly, another structure of negotiators who actually participate in the Russian-American negotiations, and it is the party of war that prevails. Precisely because the policy towards the Russians is essentially failing. That's why they simply voice whatever the president thinks.
And in fact, almost simultaneously with these statements, there is a statement from Andriy Yermak, the head of the president's office. This morning, he wrote that only a symmetrical response to Russian strikes on infrastructure, to their terror, will accelerate the path to ending the war. The price for Russia will be high. It will feel the consequences of its military strategy, which is based on terror against civilians. This is no longer 2022 with its airstrikes. It would be better if Russia stopped the war. This means that we are indeed preparing symmetrical responses, and President Zelensky has spoken about this. So are we preparing our own long-range strikes on, well, Russia's energy facilities?
We are preparing strikes on Russia's energy facilities, but only those that directly supply military sites. So when we talk about destroying substations on Russian territory, these are not the substations that supply residential apartment buildings. These are the substations that, for example, supply railway junctions. These are the substations that are connected to military facilities. Yes, it's clear that civilians will suffer from power outages.
But to be fair, they repair things quickly. For example, we strike at night, and by morning they already report that everything has been fixed. Although it's not certain that what they claim is actually true.
Here, the issue is about criticality and quantity. That's exactly why we need Western missiles. That's why we're trying, for example, with the Flamingo, to go from 1 missile per day to 7 per day. And that's why we know that the Russians have stockpiled. In the summer, they had a pause. Now, to put it mildly, they attack Ukrainian territory not every day. Rather, there's a periodicity of about 1 to 1.5 weeks. So we understand that strikes will happen. Unfortunately, there will be painful strikes, and we have problems with ballistics due to a shortage of Patriot missiles. But at the same time, we have also stockpiled our long-range drones. We have missile weaponry. Perhaps we will receive weapons for the same Attack-MS, maybe Storm Shadow, maybe HIMARS. And accordingly, our principle is this. We never attack with pinpoint strikes. We were the first to come up with decoy drones. This is an idea that the Russians stole from us. Then comes a swarm of drones, and in this, let's say, chaos in the air, which the Russians can't stop in any way, we add pinpoint missile strikes. So yes, obviously there will be strikes on their energy infrastructure, but this will definitely be connected to military targets, striking civilians. Well, first of all, as they say, our morals simply don't allow it. And secondly, it's very expensive and highly ineffective. We definitely won't go down that path.
Unfortunately, the Russians have no morals. And during yesterday's strike, we were once again convinced of this. And if you analyze their recent massive airstrikes, you'll see that for the most part, they target hypermarkets, large warehouses, bakeries, wineries, and of course, civilian homes. Why have they started targeting our economic infrastructure? Are these deliberate strikes meant to destroy both large and small businesses? Is that what they're doing? Or why have they started targeting so precisely?
Because they understand that we have a shortage of air defense systems and, well, all the key facilities, no matter what, are covered. So they constantly, in almost every attack, strike at Starokostiantynivka because our aviation is based there, but we don't see any footage showing a large number of our aircraft being destroyed. If that happened, it would immediately spread all over the internet. That's why they continue to terrorize civilians. They genuinely believe that with such strikes, they can trigger some kind of crisis in a particular region. And accordingly, if there's a crisis in a region, there could be riots, protests, road blockades. That's really all they want. Secondly, we don't have the means to protect every hypermarket and every air defense system. They need casualties, they need images of destroyed infrastructure, and they have no other ideas. This is about driving the population to a sense of hopelessness so that people start talking more and more about ending the war at any cost. Nothing has changed here. Wherever they can reach, that's exactly where they strike. Like when there was a strike on Mukachevo, almost for the first time since the full-scale invasion, specifically to target infrastructure that is very important in this region. Social instability is what they want to achieve.
And also economic instability, because these are significant costs for businesses. And perhaps they want businesses to leave, to relocate to other European countries.
This is a blow to our economy because we finance our army and the very production of drones solely from the money that comes into the budget, and that's taxes, and taxes are paid by businesses that operate. The less business operates, the fewer opportunities the country has to defend itself. It's a direct conversion. Our long-range drones and missiles, again, the president writes about holding a meeting. Tasks have been assigned, certain ones. When will we actually see these drones in widespread use? You've already mentioned that with the Flamingo, we want to go from producing 1 missile a day to 7 missiles a day. What do we need to achieve this? How much time will it take? When will we actually see massive strikes with such products on enemy territory?
Well, first of all, I don't know if it's widely known, but there is a ban from the General Staff on commenting in general about any long-range strikes. So at the moment, it's basically impossible to get information from the military regarding the timeline. As the President mentioned, it's about 4 to 6 months. In particular, Denmark will now be producing solid fuel for the Flamingo missiles. As for our long-range drones, production is being ramped up. And since the plan for the year was about 30,000 long-range drones, the goal now is to produce around 35 to 37,000. And regarding the scale, all our strikes are massive, because if we carried out pinpoint strikes, the Russian air defense would simply destroy them. This has already yielded results, as Syrskyi mentioned. In the past 2 months, there have been 86 strikes, and most of them targeted military facilities and the oil refining sector. This has already led to concrete consequences, a 17% collapse in the oil and gas sector, and we will definitely continue to ramp this up. But why do we sometimes take certain pauses, even though drones are flying constantly? It's because we've stockpiled them just like the Russians did for the winter period. Accordingly, the Russian army should feel what we feel during the heating season, when the temperature drops. What the President says about a mirrored response actually implies a certain lull, so that we have a specific answer for every Russian strike.
We will talk more about the procurement of drones and the timing of their delivery to specific brigades later in today's broadcast. It's an important topic, so stay with us throughout the day. And now for today's spectacular news, another one we simply can't ignore. We discussed it this morning with Yevhen. Magyar reported that an FPV drone destroyed a Russian Mi-28 helicopter. Is this the first time?
No, this is not the first time, fortunately. But you see, we're restoring...
But just think about the cost difference between an FPV drone and a helicopter. How is this even technologically possible?
Technologically, we've already done this before when our drones didn't have such long range, about 9 to 15 kilometers. During the intense fighting for Avdiivka, and since Avdiivka is located very close to Donetsk, helicopters that took off even from the other side of Donetsk were shot down. I think there were 1 or 2 such incidents, and there was actually video footage of it. The Russians changed their tactics because of this. For example, now a helicopter rises above the positions of our troops, still near their own defensive line, fires off unguided aerial rockets, and then returns back precisely so that it can't be hit by traditional means. They are constantly changing their tactics for using helicopters. So this is a continuation of that approach. Our drones have become more effective. They now have a longer range, and such strikes can definitely continue. The same applies to Russian aviation, which is being targeted as well. The same will apply to any kind of equipment. What's hard for us to stop is their slow creeping advances, but as soon as any equipment comes out, it's a prime target and it gets hit. That's why we're actually creating air defense forces using unmanned systems. And our developments are showing results. Now it's just a matter of scaling up, funding, personnel, and of course time.
We'll talk about personnel as well. We're displaying the QR code on the screen. What specialists are currently needed in the defense forces? What are we going to talk about today?
Today we're going to talk about the 100th Brigade. This is quite a powerful brigade that has been our longtime partner. They have a huge selection of both combat and non-combat vacancies. They have recruiters who process paperwork very quickly and handle all issues with the territorial recruitment centers. They need people with technical education to solder drones. They need communication specialists. They even need people to handle documents. And they need people for combat positions with greater corresponding support. Plus, the 18 to 24 contract that Pavlopalis announced is still in effect and is being refined. There is an option for 1 year, there is an option for 2 years, and it will continue to be available. Anyone who doesn't know what to do can reach out, get information, and only then make a final decision. Let's talk about the hybrid war that Russia has already unleashed in Europe. Let's discuss drones, particularly over Denmark, over other countries, over Sweden, and also about Moldova. Let's start with the drones that are flying over European countries. We see and understand that this is a tool that is cheap and simple, but it can actually lead to the temporary collapse of entire sectors, especially aviation. What should Europe do about this? And what are the next steps Russia might take in this direction? They will keep escalating the tension. As I said, unless the Russians get slapped on the wrist like the Turks did, everyone, as they say, except maybe Lodaci hasn't used this example, they will, to put it mildly, keep getting bolder. Why are they doing this? It's important for them to cut us off from military aid. They're not sure they'll be able to overpower us during the winter-spring period and to continue, for example, to launch a spring-summer offensive campaign. They'll need significant support, and possibly that could come from China. And right now they're selling their energy resources and the richest oil and gas regions to the Chinese. Putin said directly, get ready to heat your homes with resources like firewood because everything will be exported to China. And he understands that all of this could, to put it mildly, collapse. That's why with these actions he's showing, this is your price to pay for Ukraine. You gave her weapons and now you have nothing to shoot down with. What should they do? Go to Ukraine? And now the president is inviting them to learn how to shoot down drones using our inexpensive means. And in fact, we took this step, which sparked mixed discussions in society regarding the sale of our weapons. It is important for us now to scale up our defense industry. Its current volume is about 15 billion US dollars, and it could grow to 35 billion US dollars. And by the way, to stop the negative trend where some manufacturers, due to underutilization, are relocating their businesses to Europe, where they become valuable. This is the first path. Another path is Denmark's. This is the proposal Sweden made regarding the protection of its airspace. Sweden was outside of NATO for a long time. They often developed their own designs, sometimes together with the British. That's why they have the Gripen. This is a Swedish development, and they have their own short and medium range systems for shooting down drones. And they say they can hit almost anything there, even something as small as a pack of some product, like, as they describe, a pack of pasta. In other words, they are very precise, and they also have their own navigation system that uses platforms with 7.62 and 12.7 machine guns. Those are the standard calibers, as well as larger calibers like 30 to 40 millimeters. This is what the Swedes have already offered to share. So it is possible to step out of this process. But again, Europe missed this opportunity when it saw this high-tech war and believed that it wouldn't happen. And what Kubilius, the European Commissioner for Defense, stated is that if they start addressing this problem quickly, it will still take Europe at least a year.
We will continue the topic of hybrid warfare later in today's broadcast, when we discuss the results of the elections in Moldova and the Transnistria factor. Thank you for being with us. Dmitry Zhmail, co-founder and executive director of the Ukrainian Center for Security and Cooperation,